Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
It was a very good evening. Back in the summer of 2005, I had a very unusual sighting, yet it was almost something of a blessing to witness. Especially having such high hopes for such an existence. Myself and an entire group of people witnessed a fairy close up. Nobody knew what to say. It started with a phone call from a friend, inviting me and my girlfriend at the time out to his parents' house in the country areas of Jacora, Pennsylvania. Which has had many other odd occurrences and sightings, which I can most recently recall. We accompanied a gathering of about 7 or 8 of us in total. It was a casual evening, nothing crazy and no drugs to induce any hallucinations. We sat on his parents' back porch as the sun set behind the trees. It was a nice house set in a thick wooded area and carried on conversation amongst friends. Night came and nothing much else changed. This porch was more of a deck. It was roughly 10 by 15, which was a nice spread for all of us to gather around a table on. To the far side of the deck, which was right across from where I was sitting, my friend's mom had a huge pile of pots and plants that rested against the railing of the deck in the house, all of which sat right under the spotlight for the deck, so our area of the deck was very clearly visible in the dark. At this point, it was probably around 10 p.m., considering that it was almost pitch black outside. Suddenly, during one of those odd quiet moments in conversation, we heard a pot tink, as if it were lightly bumped. Being out in the woods in the dark, all of us turned to see what kind of animal was spying on us. To our surprise, as we all turned to look, and mind you I had a front row seat the whole time, we saw what looked like either an enormous moth. And I've seen big moths. This thing was more like a squirrel's size or a rather large bat shoot straight up from the pile of pots. However, this thing obviously had wings that were wrapped around its body like a tortilla. But I immediately noticed something that blew my mind, a human head with extremely long pointed ears, almost as if they were to be disguised as antennas. However, there was no human hair on this creature. So, it shot straight up from the pile of pots, but what happened next totally threw us all in a spin. It reached its maximum launch height and hung suspended in mid-air for about half a second when suddenly its wings burst open into a full spread right in front of the porch spotlight. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was a perfect slender human female body with wings attached along the entire side of its body, from fingertips to toes and then some. Her body was solid and silhouetted against the light, but her wings resembled the skin of an earlobe, almost like a bat's wings. Being in front of the light, I could somewhat see through her wings and actually saw the veins that carried blood throughout her body. Her skin I assume was a pale green pigment, and I say assume because her entire body and wings were covered in what looked like tiny white hairs, but there was something magical seeming about her hair, because it carried a definite soft green glow around her entire entity. I drew pictures to try to describe how she at first appeared wrapped up in her wings, and then how she opened up to a full spread X figure. She was a combination of human and butterfly, with a biological twist of bat. Now, biologically, I'd say she had the body density and weight of a good-sized squirrel. About 1 foot in height and body proportions that seemed identical to a human. The wings were so oddly beautiful in design, the way they attached to her body and stretched at full wingspan, which she had to do by opening both her arms and legs to get this full effect. Now here's the next part that just doesn't make sense. Like I said, when she first shot out of the pots, she hit a high point where she was suspended in mid-air for about half a second, and it burst open in an instant to reveal her truly graceful form, which again she hung in mid-air for another half second, making an overall 1 to 1.3 seconds of hang time. I try to be so accurate with timing because I am an animator and it's all about timing, so I think I should be pretty accurate with that guess. But after she showed herself in this full spread form, as heavy as she seemed to be, having the seemingly biological makeup that I observed, she defied gravity and fluttered right over top of the table, over top of all of us, about 4 feet above the table, and off the deck, and into the woods. From point A, the pots on the porch, to point B, the woods, she probably fluttered for about 7 to 10 seconds. It was dark outside, so once she left the confines of the porch, she left the radius of light that we could see in from the spotlight on the porch. She was gone in an instant once she crossed that line. All of us sat silent for about 30 seconds, jaws wide open, until someone burst into, "Holy crap," and the sword. We all fumbled for an explanation for about 5 to 10 minutes before we all just decided to accept what we saw, a fairy. Not one of us thought it anything else. Like I said, it for one split second, well wrapped up in its wings, resembled a giant moth or bat, but I could see that human head and instantly knew it was a humanoid. And once she opened her body to reveal her true form, there was no mistake. It was a real-life fairy. Absolutely beautiful. About an hour later, my girlfriend and I left my friend's parents' house and headed home. The whole ride home we could not stop speaking of what we saw and how it altered our perception of reality and the unknown, or lost, magics of this world. When I was younger, I used to spend most of my time in solitude in the forests and wild areas that people rarely tread. I would hear music coming from the streams and whispers in the wind, things that poets write of, but these things I truly heard and felt. In time, as I grew older, I became involved in man's world and feel that the sixth sense, if you will, has slowly faded from my being, which breaks my heart to think about. Especially knowing that magic and beings of lore do still in fact exist. Do not ever stop believing, and never turn your head from nature. That is when you stop seeing. Thanks, JF.
Wood Fairy. I was at my summer cottage near Lake Erie in western New York State. I was walking my dog out at about 8 p.m. The sun was just beginning to go down behind the trees, casting a beautiful fractured light on the front of the house. In the distance could be heard the sound of my neighbor's ATV driving around the undeveloped wetlands adjacent to my property. Suddenly my dog began acting erratically, pulling on the leash to go back inside and turning his head toward the sky, looking this way and that. I spoke to him asking what was wrong and looked around to see what was disturbing him, other than the noise in the woods. That is when I saw a peculiar winged creature flying from out of the woods across the front of the house. The creature's wings were about 3 inches across. The wings were transparent and rounded at the ends. If you formed a C with your thumb and forefinger and then touched your thumbnails together, you would have a rough estimation of the shape of the rear wings of the creature. The wings were not fluttering like a butterfly or vibrating like a dragonfly, which are 2 common insects in my yard. The creature was gliding, with perhaps a slight vibration. I only saw the creature for the length of time it took to fly to the end of the house. Once it got beyond the house into the open area of the front yard, it disappeared. My eyes were on it the whole time. I was not able to see any of its body, just the back wings from below as described above. By the shape of the wings I assumed it was a 4-winged creature. My thought after the being disappeared was, that must be what people see when they say they have seen a fairy. I felt elated seeing this creature. It was nothing I had ever seen before.
Was It A Leprechaun? One day in the late 80s, 1988 to be precise, I was on my way to an appointment in London's southeast area. I was travelling through Oxford Circus to get to the line which would take me to my station. In Oxford Circus subway, there are at least 3 levels which are hubs with various lines that run through them, and I was on the 2nd level heading to my eastbound train. I passed through the main hub of that level, which had escalators going up to the street level, and a series of other tunnels branching off of it. As I approached the main chamber, I was overcome by wonder and curiosity, because there was a sound coming from there that I could not really comprehend. It was musical, and yet at the same time it was not. The sound was very enchanting, and I was becoming more and more curious by the second to see what was making it. Entering the main chamber en route to the other tunnel, I looked over to the source, and this is what I saw in the few seconds it took to cross that chamber. There were 2 very long escalators going up and down to the street level, and in the center between the 2 stood a little man. Upon first glance I noted that he was cherubic in stature, with stocky arms and legs and face with rosy cheeks, and even at my location a few feet away, I could see his eyes were extremely blue, offwardly in color and twinkling. His lips were red, and he had a white mustache and beard, and his hair was blonde silver in color. These details were striking in relation to the others that were in evidence. In his hands he held a delicate silver flute from which that sound, or music, if you could call it that, was emanating from. It was enchanting in the sense that one's mind would try to resolve it to a melody or a harmony, and then it would dance away to become something else. His dress was very much what you would imagine were you to see a leprechaun in real life. drab in color with beige, earth green and khaki brown tones, with boots that looked made of felt and the like, and even a small felt khaki green hat on his head with a feather in it. Okay, so he could have been dressed in a costume, and that would have been the end of my curiosity were it not for what was happening around him. Crowds of people going up and down those escalators on both sides were reaching in their pockets and wallets and dropping money into his bag. Yes, he had a bag, which was a plain old plastic shopping bag. But it was filled to overflow with coins. This bag was bulging on all sides with coins and paper money, and it was overflowing through the handles part onto the floor. That was what caught my attention, and the fact that the people who were tossing in the money were not even looking at him. It was like they were in a trance. He was looking at me the whole time, watching me see what was going on, and I must have registered some astonished awareness on my face, because he smiled in the middle of his playing and gave me a wink and a nod. He continued to play on, that eerie music filling the hole in the ears and mind, and the people continued on like sleepers, not paying attention, just digging in their pockets and dropping money into his bag. I continued on to my connecting tunnel, and not a few feet down that tunnel I encountered a young man playing an electric guitar with an amplifier, and who was being completely drowned out by the eerie sounds coming from the adjoining chamber. I looked into his guitar case as I went by, and saw that he had only a few coins in there. I looked at his face, and he gave me a look that bespoke amazement and irritation, that his music should be drowned out by that otherworldly one coming from the main hall. Feeling badly for him, I dropped a pound coin into his case and continued on my way, slightly befuddled by what I had just seen and experienced. I later shared this with some friends, that I had seen what I thought was a real leprechaun, and told them the story. They laughed at me and thought I'd lost my marbles. Then about a week or so later, one of my friends came up to me at work very excited. She said she had just seen my leprechaun in the same place, in the exact same situation as I had described. Everything was the same, down to the people in a trance dropping money into his bag. She said when she had seen him, her mouth dropped open in amazement as she realized I had been telling it exactly as it was, and he too had looked over to her during that moment of astonishment and given her a wink and a nod. We never saw or heard of him again after that, so perhaps he got what he needed. Lotus.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.